I saw the dog in front of the door. I talked to him, but he didn't come closer. His look was different, as if it wasn't him. There he was, on two legs, just watching me. Good evening. Welcome to the next session of Paranormal Stories. Tonight we present 3 stories that cross the boundaries of what we still want to believe is real, of what we seek to convince ourselves, whether it's the reality we can understand, the one that's closest to what we've always seen, as well as possible. Today there are stories of impossible encounters, of inexplicable presences that appear as someone we love. But what happens when we see a figure like that, and it's not what it seems? Hope you're in the mood to listen to us. And if not, it's time to disconnect from everything out there, even if it's just for a little while. Let's forget about every worry. It's time to focus on making it to the end of the stories in this episode. Welcome to this night of ghosts, goblins, and entities that transform. Once again, turn off the light, get comfortable, and let yourself be carried away by the following stories of the night. Good evening, Uriel and Relatos de la Noche community. I'm Elise Alvarado. I started listening to this project back in 2018 on the recommendation of someone who was my classmate at the time. The first episode I listened to was the scariest story from Relatos de la Noche. For years, I wanted to share these 3 stories I have with you, but I hadn't worked up the courage, mainly for sentimental reasons, as these stories occurred after my father died in 2006. And even though I wasn't the main character in these events, my dad's death is still a painful subject for me. I was born in Nicaragua, but I currently live in Costa Rica. Several years ago, I moved with my mom and brother after life had already become difficult. My dad's name was Roberto, and we were a family of 4. Him, my mom Norma, my brother Aaron, and me. When this happened, we lived in Managua. I was 6 and my brother was only 20 days old. My father went to Honduras on a work trip, but he never came back. Robbers killed him to steal his belongings. That left an immense void. A widow with a newborn baby and a little girl who couldn't quite understand what was happening. What had happened to her dad. This is where the first story I want to tell you begins, which happened just a few weeks after his death. At that time, the 3 of us in my family slept together in the master bedroom. My mom let me sleep with her, and my brother slept in his crib next to the bed. My mom tells me that she was already falling asleep, when suddenly, in the distance, the sound of my dad's car engine was heard. And she, half asleep and half awake, said to herself, "What a relief. Roberto is back already." But then she heard the garage gate open, the car come in, and the door close. She clearly heard my father's footsteps, the sound he made when he whistled while walking through the house. He turned on the television. He always liked to watch baseball games. Then she heard how he opened the refrigerator and put something in the microwave to heat up. Suddenly he heard footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps halted at the room's door. Just as it was about to open, my mom jumped up, and it was at that moment she remembered everything. She remembered that my dad was no longer alive, that nothing human could be on the other side of that door, that nothing living could be outside the room. She took my brother from the crib, held him to her chest, and hugged me too. She told me that she started to pray, to beg God, please, don't let me see it, don't let it come in, because if I see it, I won't be able to handle it. At that moment, everything stopped and all sound ceased. The second story occurred soon after, in the same house. My Aunt Thelma, one of my mom's aunts, had come to live with us to help us out. And that's because my mom was still recovering from the C-section and was going through a really tough mourning period. One afternoon, my aunt washed dishes at the window overlooking our beautiful garden, with a mango tree in the center. I'm in kindergarten, and my mom had gone to take a nap with my little brother. My aunt was enjoying that rare silence in the house in those days. When she looked up at the window, she saw how my dad came out from behind the mango tree. He picked up a few fruits that were lying on the ground and then went into the room where the laundry was done. Aunt Thelma stood completely still for a moment, and then, with a deep fear she had never felt before, she gathered her courage, went out to the yard, and started calling my dad to talk to him. My mom woke up when she heard her and came over. My aunt told her what she had seen, and together they finally went to check the laundry room. Of course, there was no one there. The third story happened to another one of my mom's aunts named Leonore. One early morning around 4 o'clock, she got up to say goodbye to her daughters because they had been invited on a trip to the beach and were about to leave. After the girls left, she stayed in the kitchen drinking coffee before returning to sleep. Suddenly, she heard a car parking outside her house. She thought maybe her daughters had forgotten something, so she quickly got up from the table to go open the door. But before opening it, she heard my dad's voice on the street behind the door. Aunt Leonore fainted on the spot. Hours later, one of her sons found her on the floor. None of us went to my father's funeral. One of his brothers took care of everything in Honduras and didn't let us say goodbye. Afterwards, those same brothers took all the papers from my mom about my father's businesses, about the house where we lived. They took everything from us. My mom couldn't work after giving birth, and eventually we had to leave the house. The money ran out, and they never helped us again. They completely turned their backs on us. That's why I think maybe my dad kept trying to find a way to be with us, to come back, to warn us, to protect us in some way, or simply to show us that he was still there, very close to us. Thank you, Uriel, for giving us this space and letting us share our stories, no matter how difficult. I'll write to you again very soon. I still have many stories to tell, like the things that happened in my grandmother's house, which was used as a torture center during the war. And I also have a story that happened to me, one that I experienced after listening to this very podcast. Those stories will be for another time. Good night, community. Hello, Uriel, and hello to the whole community. I'm a big fan of the channel ever since my brother showed me the podcast a few months ago. I listen to it nearly every day, and though I have many episodes left, it's now my turn to share my experience. I want my story to be anonymous. 2 years ago during Holy Week, I vacationed in Pachuca with my family. We also visited the nearby towns. In Huasca de Ocampo, we stopped by the Goblin Museum. It's a very beautiful place, full of history and mysticism. During the tour, they explain what goblins are and all about them. Of course, they also share the stories of the local people who have been living with these energies for years. At the end of the tour, there's a souvenir shop where you can find many things. But what caught my attention was a shelf that was full of figures of elves, fairies, and trolls. In particular, each elf figure had a characteristic written on a piece of paper, like for love, abundance, money, and so on. And after listening to the story and the anecdotes of a couple of people, I thought it was a good idea to buy a figure. My parents are very skeptical, so they had no problem with me taking it home. As for me, I consider myself a believer in the paranormal, although I had never experienced anything out of the ordinary. At the register, the girl who helped me gave a few instructions before I took the figure home. The elf. By the way, I took the one that said luck, thinking that having my own lucky elf would be something interesting. But before charging me, the girl said to me, "You have to give it a name. You shouldn't expose it to direct sunlight. You have to give it sweets and sunflower seeds from time to time. If it pulls too many pranks or scares you, scold it like a misbehaving child. And most importantly, you must treat it like a member of your family, you and everyone who lives in your house. Because if someone has negative feelings toward it, the duende might sense that energy and play mean pranks on that person." At first, I thought what the girl told me was just some kind of script, that people who work there learn to keep the magic alive or to boost their sales in the gift shop. I had no idea that she was giving me those instructions very, very seriously. Still, I followed the instructions but didn't take them very seriously. But that's how I ended up calling my elf Pablito. Huasca de Ocampo was our last vacation stop, so we began the trip home that same day. I'm from a town called Coscomatepec de Bravo, in the high mountains region of Veracruz. At that moment, I had no idea of everything that was about to happen when I got back home. We arrived early Sunday morning. First, I put Pablito on a shelf above my bed. I set out a small plate with some candies and sunflower seeds for him. "Welcome to your new home, Pablito. I hope you feel comfortable here, and I really hope you help me have good luck. I'm going to take care of you and give you candies. I just hope that, please, you don't hide my things, and most importantly, that you don't scare me, please." Those were my words before I went to sleep. I didn't realize I'd encounter this energy for the first time the very next day. It was noon. My parents had left the house, and I was about to wash my clothes and a pair of dirty sneakers. I put on my headphones and started. I was so into the music and what I was doing when suddenly I had that feeling. When you sense someone watching you. Turning around, I just saw a shadow running into the yard. At first, I thought it was one of my dogs, but when I looked out, I didn't see them anywhere. In my room, there's a window that faces the yard. When I looked up, I saw someone closing the curtain as if hiding. In that moment, I felt such a chill and fear that I didn't want to move. I couldn't believe that this was really happening. And in broad daylight, being alone at home, I was really scared. At that moment, I remembered what the girl at the museum told me. If he misbehaves, you have to scold him like a little kid. So I took off my headphones, and I don't know how it happened. I don't know where I got the courage from. but I started walking toward my room. My legs were shaking, but even so, I opened the door and stood in front of Pablito. You better not be messing around, man. I told you I didn't want you scaring me. I treat you well. I give you candy and snacks. I don't think it's funny that you want to play those kinds of pranks on me. Those were the words I said to scold him, and honestly, doing it made me feel a little calmer. Then I left more sunflower seeds and a few candies on his plate. I left the room saying, "All right, behave yourself, man," and closed the door. After that, a couple of weeks went by before I started getting scared on a daily basis again. I gave him sunflower seeds, candy or gum, and water. Almost every time I went to college or out with friends, I'd say goodbye to him and greet him when I returned. Until one time, I forgot to do it. I didn't give him his seeds or say goodbye to him. I just left and was out all day. That night was the worst. It was already early morning. I was getting ready to sleep after spending some time on my phone. When suddenly I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, footsteps I recognized as my dogs. Even though we didn't allow them to come up to the second floor door, since they got used to peeing there. After a couple of scoldings from my dad and me, they didn't dare to come up anymore, so it seemed pretty strange to me to hear them. Suddenly, both dogs started barking really loudly and then in a very aggressive way. I had never heard them bark like that with so much desperation. Instead of being scared, I was just annoyed because they wouldn't let me sleep. Thinking that maybe they saw a cat up on the roof or they were just barking at the neighbor's dogs. From there, you can see the neighbor's rooftop. I thought they'd keep barking until I went out to quiet them. I took the blanket off, sat on the edge of the bed, and before I could put on my shoes, someone used a loud sound that made my dogs stop barking and return to the yard, slowly but still growling. One of my dogs is a pit bull, and the other is a German shepherd. I couldn't imagine what could have scared them like that. I was paralyzed with fear, sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't feel like moving at all. I took a deep breath. I lay back down very slowly, covered myself completely with a blanket, and turned toward the wall with my back to the door of my room. And to Pablito. Suddenly, I started to hear someone playing with the doorknob like they were trying to open it. Followed by a laugh like a child when they're up to mischief and don't want to get caught. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even want to move because I was so scared, and I started to cry. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. I started to pray very quietly, almost whispering. I didn't realize when I fell asleep. I considered not telling my parents, as they're very skeptical and always have answers for everything, like it was just a dream, or maybe you were just tired. It was the cats on the roof, or because you ate too much, your stomach was full, and that's why you had a bad dream. These were always their answers. But that morning, my dad wasn't alone. My mom and I were there too. When I sat down, she joined me, and in a tone I rarely hear from her, said, "Son, I didn't want to tell you before, because I want to believe that what's happening has nothing to do with that figure you have in your room. But if that's not it, I want to ask you, please, to get rid of that elf." Before I could ask why, she kept talking. "Neither your dad nor I have slept the past few nights. We only managed to rest for a couple of hours before the sun comes up, but all night long, we hear giggles and footsteps upstairs and in the hallway. Your dad barely sleeps now, and when he does, he wakes with shoulder pain as if he spent the night carrying someone. He won't tell you anything. You know how he is. He won't admit he's scared because he can't explain what's happening. But I'm really worried about his health. You know, he has blood pressure problems, and not sleeping is going to affect him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from my mom, the person who always has an explanation for everything. Admitting that something strange was happening in the house, something supernatural, and worst of all, something that was directly affecting her and my dad. At that moment, the fear I felt mixed with a lot of concern for my dad's health. I didn't know what to do. I felt powerless in this situation. It was more than obvious that my parents didn't like Pablito, maybe because they were afraid of him or simply saw him as something unimportant. And maybe that's what made this energy upset. Even my brother, who was studying in Puebla, got scared by Pablito. One weekend when he came to visit, he confessed to me that when I wasn't there, he went into my room to get some things. He left the light on when he left, admitting he was also a bit scared of Pablito. But later he gathered the courage to go up and turn off the light. But before he did it, from the yard, he saw how the light coming from my window suddenly went out, even though there was no one on the second floor. In my desperation, I told my girlfriend everything that was happening. I told her I didn't know what to do about my goblin, that I never thought the situation would go this far. But when I told her everything that was happening to me, she didn't really take me seriously. She gave me brief answers and mostly looked at her phone. That really bothered me. I couldn't believe she was acting so indifferent about something that had me so worried. That made me not want to keep talking about it. It made me not want to tell anyone about it again. Broadly speaking, when I tried to talk about it, it seemed absurd to say I bought a goblin, and now it was making life impossible for my family and me. I was so upset with my girlfriend that I ignored her for a few days. I ignored her messages and calls until she visited me one day. I don't know what you're going through, and if I didn't give the answer you wanted, it's because I don't have it. I've never experienced anything like what you're going through. Look, I can't help you, but I found someone who can. I was searching in Facebook and WhatsApp groups for someone who could help you, and I think I found them. They're here in Coscomatepec, and we're going to see them this afternoon. When she told me that, I felt awful. I had pushed her away without realizing she was trying to help me. I apologized to her, and later that same day we went to see him. Before we got to his house, many scenarios went through my mind. I imagined a dark house with black candles and a pentagram. Someone who looked like a warlock or something like that. That's how I imagine everyone who ends up helping the protagonists in these stories. But it wasn't like that. We arrived at an ordinary apartment with a completely normal person, except for the small detail that their house had a very strong smell of incense and herbs. He welcomed us, we sat down in his living room, and before I could say anything, he told me, "You have an energy attached to you, and it's very strong." At that moment, I didn't think much of it. I thought my girlfriend had already explained a bit about my situation, but later, she told me she hadn't. That he didn't know anything about what was happening to me, that she only asked for help to find someone who really knew about mysticism and esotericism, but he didn't know the reason why we went to see him. I started telling him everything that had been happening to me in the last few days, trying not to leave out any details. And when I finished, the first thing this person said to me really discouraged me. Wow, I think you have a bigger problem than I thought. I was really discouraged. I told him that I was already tired and that I wanted that elf to leave my house, that I was thinking about breaking it or throwing it away, anything, just so I wouldn't have it with me anymore. He stopped me and said it was a terrible idea. The problem was that elves are energies, and if for some reason I broke the figure or threw it in the trash, it would be much worse. Since that figure is the physical form that represents that energy, and without it, it was going to be much more complicated for me to get rid of it. That energy was going to stay in my house, and it would be much harder to get it out. He told me the following. I suggest these 2 ways to remove this entity from your house. 1, take it to a church that has 2 or more entrances. At the door that's on the side of the chapel, leave it there and tell it, "Wait for me here. I'll be right back. Don't move from this place." Then you leave through the other door, abandoning it there. 2, take it to a place like a forest where there's a lot of nature, and tell him that now he has a new purpose, that he will be in charge of taking care of that place, like a kind of guardian. But if you want to do this beforehand, you must have everyone who lives in your house that you say goodbye to him and give him a final offering. Sweets or seeds? I found this option a bit more difficult, especially because of my dad, because I couldn't picture him talking to a small clay figurine, asking it to leave quietly and stop bothering us. But be very careful, he told me. If for any reason you do either of these 2 things wrong, the consequences could be worse than what you're already experiencing. After leaving, I went home to talk to my mom. I told her everything this person had told me and that the best option was to take him to a forest. But before that, she and my dad had to say goodbye to him because if they didn't, the situation wouldn't change. I told her that at night I would leave my bedroom door open, that they could do it while I was asleep in case they felt embarrassed for me to hear them. My mom didn't say anything. She just said, "I'm going to talk to your dad." That same night, my mom came into my room. I pretended to be asleep, but I wasn't yet. I heard her whisper something to Pablito. She spoke to him in a low voice, and then I heard her put something in his candy dish. About 10 minutes later, my dad came in, and just like my mom, I heard him whisper something. Then he left some seeds on his plate. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my dad, the person who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, was there, saying goodbye to a goblin, asking him to leave peacefully, to let us be at peace. I think that's when I realized that the consequences of bringing that goblin into my house were bigger than I thought. The next day I got up early, put Pablito in a box, went to pick up my girlfriend, and we bought something for breakfast. Afterward, we visited a popular local spot called La Preta, a very large place on the outskirts of town with lots of trees, a river, and plenty of nature. When we arrived, we had breakfast by the river. I felt a little calmer, thinking that I would finally be able to sleep better, and that my parents would also have one less thing to worry about. After we finished eating, my girlfriend also said goodbye to Pablito. I was the last one to do so. "Pablito, it's time to say goodbye. I can't keep you here anymore, but you have a more important task now. Now it's your turn to be the guardian of this place, taking care of its trees and the little animals that live here, the river. Behave yourself. I really enjoyed having you with me for a while. I hope you'll be happier here. After that, just like that, suddenly, strange things stopped happening in the house. Laughter and footsteps were no longer heard. In the early morning, my parents went back to sleeping peacefully, and the subject was never brought up again. Sometimes I see those same little figurines of elves, fairies, and trolls in some gift shops, but now I see them in a very different way, with a lot of respect and even a little bit of fear. I hope this story serves as a warning to anyone who hears it, if it ever gets published. If you're thinking about buying one of these figures, think twice. Because honestly, what I went through is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's more complicated than it seems. And if you find one somewhere in the woods, especially here near the dam, please leave it there. It's there for a reason. Thank you very much for reading me. Thank you for staying here, because now we're going to a very special story, the one that closes tonight's trilogy. I'm going to remind you, as always, subscribe if you haven't done so. It's very, very important for us, and if you've enjoyed this episode, only if you've enjoyed it, remember to share it with a friend, with someone you think might like it, or who has a story to tell us. We continue with another story whose author prefers to remain anonymous. The intermission is over. My town is very beautiful. Almost all my friends have left here over time. They don't find it attractive to live here, almost in the jungle, but I decided to stay and help with the family business. We have a small restaurant that serves both the people who come back to town after work, as well as those lost travelers who, for some reason, pass through here. One night, from the road, almost when we were about to close, a big white dog with large ears arrived. You could tell he had a hard life, he had scars on his face, and you could see how skinny he was, that he hadn't eaten in days. He was fearful, but I think his hunger was stronger, so he came closer to ask for something to eat with his eyes. I gave him some food and water. He didn't wag his tail, he didn't thank me. He finished eating and continued on his way down the road toward the town. However, in the morning when we arrived to open, there he was lying at the restaurant door. We noticed he watched everyone who entered closely. He stayed like that all day. I gave him some food, fearing that now, puff, I had a dog. I was never interested in having them, since I lack the time to care for them and hate seeing them tied up or abandoned in homes, treated like furniture. In the afternoon, with just a few customers left and only a taxi driver stopping by at the end of his shift, I was already considering closing up. It hadn't been a good day. That's when a couple of guys came in. They weren't from around there. You could tell they'd been working because they were sweating. The white dog barked, nearly blocking their entry, so I chased him off by pretending to throw stones. One thing was feeding him, but it was another if he could bite someone or make me lose customers. But even though I made him go away, when I went back into the restaurant, he came back and stayed at the door watching. The young people looked at the menu. Very nervous because of the dog, they said they couldn't afford anything and that they'd better go look for something else. I asked them how much they had. I never deny food to someone who's hungry, but they ignored me and went out, passing by the dog with a lot of fear. I was about to close up when the taxi driver, who was finishing his meal, asked me if I had noticed what had happened. I told him no. He told me that the two guys had large kitchen knives hidden in their clothes and that they were nervously gripping them. They were going to mug you, they were going to rob all of us, he told me, and he realized it. and he pointed at the dog. I gave him dinner, and when I was about to go home, the white dog jumped into the bed of my truck without asking for permission. That's when I realized I already had a dog. That's when I decided to give him a name, Chavo. I always loved that Mexican show, and even though I now know that Chavo means boy, at that time I thought it meant hey or something like that. Chavo became an important part of the restaurant's routine. Every day he would come with me to work, watch over the place from the door, growl at a few people, which immediately made me suspicious of them, and at night we would go back home. We had a quiet life without many worries, other than making enough to keep the restaurant running. The days, months, and years went by for us. Chavo got old. It was hard for him to jump into the truck bed, and I had to get him a ladder. One day he left down the road he came from. I thought he would come back, but he didn't. That night, I waited for him for hours and searched for him, but couldn't find him. I spent the whole night sad and worried. I left food and water outside the restaurant in case he came back. I knew he was going to wait for me, but when I arrived the next day, everything was untouched. I did it for days, but Chavo never returned. A few weeks later, when I was about to close, I saw him. Chavo was sitting in front of the restaurant. When I turned off the lights, I called him, but he didn't come closer. I wanted to go to him, but he wouldn't let me get close. His gaze was more human, almost as if he wanted to tell me something. I got into the truck and he jumped into the bed. I was glad. I drove home and almost without letting me stop, he jumped out to get down. When we arrived, he sniffed everything in the yard like it was new, then went into his house. From inside, he looked at me closely. All I could see were his eyes shining in the dark. I thought there was nothing else I could do. I'll take him to the vet the next day, to the town. That night, something woke me up. At first, like in a dream, I heard Chavo barking. When I opened my eyes, I heard as if someone was trying to get into the house, forcing the door. But it couldn't be possible. Chavo was outside. He wouldn't have allowed it. I grabbed my knife to look out the window to see who was there in front of the door. But standing right in front of the window where I was Chavo, standing on two legs, just looking at me as if waiting for me to say something. After a long moment, he got on all fours and lay in front of his little house. In the morning, he was gone. I looked for him everywhere, but nothing. Once again, he had left. That afternoon, the taxi driver came to the restaurant. I hadn't seen him in a while. The same one who almost made me keep Chavo. He asked me about him, if I had found him. I told him no, but I didn't know how he could know that he was missing. It had been a while since I went, and I wasn't telling anyone about it. He told me he knew it wasn't with me because he saw it on the road a few kilometers from there about a week ago. He stopped to talk to him near the bridge, but Chavo didn't look back at him. With his eyes already very tired, he just went into the trees and he couldn't follow him. But he told me where he was. He also told me that he recognized that look. That dogs like him don't like to make their owners, their life companions, suffer. They don't like them to suffer seeing them die. He told me to go look for him. And that's what I did. I left the restaurant with my mom and went to the bridge. I found Chavo lying there like he did when getting comfortable to rest, but the poor guy. You could tell he had been dead for at least a week, probably the same day he left. I had a strange feeling of sadness and fear, a lot of sadness and a lot of fear. Because something that looked like Chavo, like my friend, went to the restaurant when he was already dead, followed me home and wanted to come in. I told my mom, who said a prayer. She warned me that what comes at night quietly, what comes in the form of our pets, our friends, our family. She told me to never trust them if they come at night and act differently. If something makes me think they're not themselves, I'm not sure if it's a belief from here, the jungle, or just in general. I let Chavo rest where he decided to, but I brought flower seeds that I scattered over him, over his body, to see if by chance they would grow. They did. Now, every time I pass by there, I can see Chavo's flowers from the bridge.